Greetings, YouTube! The Doctor is in. Dr. Urias Papers here, coming at you with another commentary on Dungeons and Dragons. And today we are going to talk about the spell Conjure Elementals. I've got the Legacy version up here right now. We are going to talk about the 2024 version, what the changes are, compare and contrast, all that. We're also going to look at all the other Conjure spells up until this point. And we're going to look at whether the new 2024 Conjure Elementals is actually better or worse than some of the lower level Conjure spells to this point. But first, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you have any questions or comments, please leave a question or comment. And don't forget to hit that notification bell. All right. So here is the Legacy version of the Conjure Elementals. It was a 5th level spell. It took 1 minute to cast it. It lasted for an hour with concentration. So this was not a spell that you were going to cast in combat. But back in the day when we did review this, we gave it an A-. So you brought forth an elemental servant. Choose air, earth, fire, or water. It fills a 10-foot cube within range, which was 90 feet. It did not cost anything, but you're supposed to burn some incense and things like that. So an elemental of challenge rating 5 or lower, appropriate to the area you choose, appears. So if you chose air, it would be air, fire, etc. So like the example they give is a fire elemental emerges from a bonfire. An earth elemental rises up from the ground, and it disappears when it drops to 0. And it was friendly to you. It rolled its own initiative. It obeyed your commands. If you broke concentration, however, it didn't disappear, and you lost control, and it could go after you. And if you cast this at a higher level spell, you got a higher challenge rating by 1 for every spell slot above 5th level. So what that means is that you could get, at 6th level, you could get a challenge rating 6. At 7th level, a challenge rating 7, so on and so forth. And they had a list of creatures here that you could summon. So challenge rating 5 were air, earth, fire, and water elementals, including a salamander or a zorn. And there were some pretty good creatures in here that you could summon. Now, 2024 has pretty much gotten rid of the ability to do any of that. And now we are conjuring spirits that do things, but they're not bags of hit points that we can move out into combat like it was before. Oh, and I forgot, so that I don't forget again, this was usable by druids, wizards, and Circle of the Land Coast druids. Not sure why that was, but it was mainly a druid and a wizard spell. The new Conjure Elementals is usable by druids, wizards, and Circle of the Sea druids, which I think is the new coastal Circle land druid, but it's still druids and wizards. Still a 5th level spell. Now it's 1 action to cast this, which is the same as most of the other Conjure spells. It has a range of 60 feet, verbal and somatic components. It is concentration. It does last for 10 minutes. So you conjure a large, so that's 4 squares, intangible spirit from the elemental planes that appears in an unoccupied space within range, 60 feet. You choose the spirit's element. Air does lightning damage, earth does thunder damage, fire does fire damage, and water does cold damage. And then the spirit lasts for the duration. Whenever a creature you see enters the spirit's space, so they have to enter the space does not have to enter them. So they have to walk into it, be pushed into it. So this is one of these spells that will utilize forced movement very well. So whenever it enters the spirit space or starts its turn within 5 feet of the spirit, you can force that creature to make a dexterity saving throw if the spirit has no creature restrained. So if the spirit is already restraining a creature, which happens on a failed save, if it is restraining a creature, then that's it. It can only target one thing at a time, unfortunately. So if they fail that dex save, they take 8d8 damage, equal to the spirit's damage, lightning, thunder, fire, or cold. And the target is restrained. So let's take a look at that. Restrained is a great condition. Their speed goes to 0. The speed goes to 0. The attack rolls against them have advantage, and their attack rolls have disadvantage, and they have disadvantage on dexterity saving throws, which is an awesome thing because that feeds back into the spell, because at the start of each of its turns, the restrained creature repeats the dexterity saving throw, which it now has disadvantage on. And then on a failed save, it does the target takes 4d8 damage of the spirit's type. On a successful save, the target isn't restrained by the spirit, but they could be pushed back in, which means they're going to have to make a new save. So again, this one is, it's a condition that sits on the battlefield, and you have to manipulate the opponent to interact with the condition, because it is going to be hard for the opponent to interact with the condition on their own. So when you drop this thing, you want to drop it adjacent to opponents so that when they start their turn, remember, if it enters or starts its turn within 5 feet of the spirit, the thing happens. So you want to drop them so that it is adjacent to an enemy or an opponent, and they will start their turn adjacent to it, meaning they're going to have to make a saving throw. Now, you can upcast this spell. The damage increases by 2d8 for each slot above 5th level, and that's all the damage. So that 8d8 at 5th level becomes 10d8, and the 4d8 becomes 6d8. So each one of those d8s does 4.5 points of damage. So we're going to be doing about 36 points of damage on average with the initial failed save, and we're going to be doing 18 points of damage with the other failed saves. And if you keep adding levels onto that, that's going to be about another 9 average damage. So that 36 becomes 45 at 5th level, and the 18 becomes 27 at 5th level. So that's not too bad. That's quite a bit of damage. The only thing I don't like about this spell is that it essentially only affects one creature at a time, whereas a lot of the other conjure spells affect more than one creature at a time. So let's take a look at some of these other ones. Well, before we do that, let's give it a grade. So I think I'm going to keep this one I'm going to move this one down to a B+, because I think there are other conjure spells that I would rather cast than this one. But here's the thing I'll say. Druids don't have a lot of damaging type of spells available to them, so that would be the case to use this spell. Are there better 5th level druid spells? Probably, but this might be one of the go-to ones that you have. So let's take a look at Conjure Elementals, because that's the 3rd level option, and it is also a druid spell. It's also a ranger spell, but rangers are not going to be casting it until really high level. So we've gone over this spell already. You conjure nature spirits as a large pack of intangible creatures. You have advantage on strength saving throws while you're within 5 feet of the pack. And it's a large pack, so it takes up 4 squares. And when you move, you can move the pack. So that's an automatic. Whenever you move the pack within 10 feet of a creature that you can see, and whenever a creature you can see enters the space within 10 feet of the pack or ends its turn there, you can force a dex save. On a failed save, it does damage. That's really all it does, is it does damage. And it does 3d10 damage. So that, on average, is about 16 points of damage. And then another 5.5 for each level. So if you were to cast this at 5th level, which would be the equivalent of the Conjure Elemental spell, then we would get another 11 damage. So it would be doing roughly 27 points of damage. Now, this can affect more than one creature, but it doesn't restrain anything. There's no secondary kind of debuff on this. It's just straight damage, and it's slashing damage. So there could be things that are that are resistant to this. Now let's look at Conjure Minor Elementals, because that's the next one. That's a 4th level. So you conjure spirits from the elemental plane that move about you in a 15-foot emanation until the spell ends. You make attacks you make deal an extra 2d8 damage whenever you hit a creature. The damage is either acid, cold, fire, or lightning. So there's no thunder in this. And there's no thunder. So it's acid, cold, fire, or lightning. So, and then the emanation is difficult terrain. So there's a little bit of a debuff with this one, but it affects everything. And you can upcast this for another 2d8 for every spell slot above 4. Now this one is a little bit different than, and in comparison to Conjure Elemental, in that this one essentially procs off of the number of attacks that you make. So you really want to cast this as a druid. I wouldn't want to use this very much unless I had a lot of attacks. Maybe I am wild shaping into something that gets a lot of attacks. So this is better if it is cast with in combination with another class that gets a lot of attacks, or if you're hasted or something like that. So I would say, this is part of a different build. All right, Conjure Woodland Beings. Definitely, I would rather cast this spell than Conjure Elemental. So you conjure nature spirits that fly about you in a 10-foot emanation, and then whenever the emanation enters, so that is the area of effect enters the space of a creature you can see, or whenever a creature you can see enters the space or ends its turn there, you can force that creature to make a wisdom saving throw. It takes 5d8 force damage. Very little is resistant to force. On a failed save, or half as much on a successful one. You can only do this once per turn, and then you can disengage as a bonus action. So it's doing force damage. There's not really a debuff with this. And then you can upcast this for a d8 for every spell level above 4. I would rather use this than Conjure Elemental. You can't have both of these up at the same time. This will affect more than one creature, and it's procced off of you entering their space. And you get a disengage, but there are some things you could do with this spell, like we've gone over this, where you can turn into an owl. You can have this on, turn into an owl, and just start flying around and blasting everything. Now, on average, this one is going to do 23 points of force damage, so that's 4.5 per d8, and 4 of those equals 18, and then the last one is 23. So you're gonna run into something. It's gonna do 23 points of damage on a failed wisdom save, which is not easy to make for most creatures. And then you're gonna come out. You're gonna you could fly around a lot of different creatures and do that. Then you're going to move out. You're gonna use your action to ready a move, a dash, on your next turn, and then on the next turn you're immediately going to go forward, and you're going to trigger that, so you can do it all over again. So there's a lot of different ways to do this, but I really like this spell a lot. I think we gave that spell an A. Conjure Elementals, I'm going to keep it a B+. It's a nice one to have. If I have Conjure Woodland Beings up, I'm going to keep that one up, and then once I'm done with that spell, I may go over to Conjure Elementals. If I need to restrain something, then this is probably the spell I'm going to go to, Conjure Elementals, just because of the disadvantage on Dex saving throws. If I have other members of my adventuring party that rely on dexterity saving throws, this is definitely one I want to put out. If I can restrain them, then I will put this down. And fireballs and lightning bolts and those kinds of things can then come out and just start wailing on creatures. Disintegrate is another good one. You really want things to have disadvantage on saving throws. So all in all, we're giving this one a B+. I don't think it's a bad spell. It's definitely a good spell. It's up there, but there are a few spells that are better. And that is what we have for everybody today. I appreciate everybody tuning in, and I will catch everybody